Thank you, Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted very much to have an opportunity to contribute to this important and very serious debate on how to bring this region, and speaking about the region I have on mind, Southeastern Europe, back onto the world investment map, energetically and efficiently. I'm speaking on behalf of the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, the organization I stepped in 10 months ago when, having finished my previous capacity as the Prime Minister of the Czech Republic. The progress that the region has made in the past decade has been remarkable in many ways. It's out of question. But the global crisis who knocked at the doors in such a stormy way and who came so suddenly, and for many of us very surprisingly, exposed some critical weaknesses as well. During the pre-crisis years, persistent problems with trade barriers and the business climate were very often ignored, and the broader long-term vision for sustainable growth was also lacking. This contributed, besides the crisis itself, to a drop in inflows of foreign direct investments over the past 2 years. The question is, how can investment be revived? Representing an institution that focuses primarily on the private sector development, it's not surprising that I turn first to the business environment. I would mention here 2 surveys carried out jointly by the World Bank and the EBRD, the Business Environment and Enterprise Performance Surveys, so-called BEPS, and the Life in Transition survey, named LIGHTS, whose results, both of these surveys, were released last week in our headquarters in London. Both surveys clearly point to the problems experienced by households, local businesses, and foreign investors alike, who typically complain, and that's no news, about tax administration complications, corruption, and the poor functioning of the courts. Inefficient customs procedures are a serious obstacle in Southeastern Europe, affecting in particular the tradable sectors, which need a strong boost for sustainable growth. The quality of infrastructure is also a major impediment, including for intra-regional trade and investment. All those are not easy problems to solve, but progress can be made if policymakers are determined enough and tackling these problems effectively. This would make the region much more attractive from an investor perspective. One of the unfortunate legacies of the conflicts in the 90s in that the region still tends to trade less than one would expect for small open economies of this size. The level of openness measured by the sum of exports and imports divided by GDP is typically here between 40 up to 80% in this region or in this region's countries, compared with over 100% in most Central European countries, which is quite considerable difference. Longer term, it's clear that educational standards and innovation potential will need to be improved significantly. The positive link between education, competitiveness, and economic growth is well established. I don't want to say that the region is doing badly in regard to educational standards, since major efforts are being made in all countries to improve the level. However, cross-country studies clearly show a lower level of attainment in reading, math, and science in the Southeastern European countries compared to the OECD average. I want now to say a few words about EBRD's engagement in the region. In previous year, in 2010, the EBRD invested over €1 billion in the Western Balkans as a part of its very efficient and strong crisis response. When we look at the broader Southeastern Europe region, then the volume of financing committed in the last year stands at over €2.5 billion. These are historically record high commitment figures for our institution. They demonstrate the priority we continue to give to this region and that we remain optimistic about its long-term future. On the latter point, our optimism regarding the region's future, I have to say that it's strongly supported by the region's own inherent optimism. Our Life in Transition survey, which I mentioned a couple of minutes before, which we demonstrated that while overall level of life satisfaction in the region is still below the one in the Western Europe, but it has not decreased significantly in the face of severe economic crisis, which, let's not forget it, hit this region more than Western Europe or emerging markets. I personally was particularly impressed to see that, according to our survey, the combination of democracy and market economy clearly remains the most favored option for the people across this region. The prospects for attracting new foreigners with investments and wider prospects for prosperity and stability of this region are directly related to its further integration into the EU. We have been very much encouraged by the successful completion of the accession talks by Croatia, and I would like to congratulate the Croatian authorities on this occasion. The Croatian example sends a very important message to the countries of the Western Balkans and should help to create a new momentum in their efforts to the EU approximation, where they can count on continuing support from the EBRD. We also remain committed to further supporting regional cooperation in Southeast Europe, which is a huge achievement of this region. Pursuing a regional approach, we are planning an investment promotion conference for the Western Balkans in our headquarters in London early next year. This would be a continuation of the discussions and the informal launch of Prime Ministers of the Western Balkans held in this country, in Zagreb, in May of last year, which was initiated by the EBRD and co-hosted by the President of the EBRD, Tomas Miro, and the Croatian Prime Minister, Mrs. Jadranka Kosor. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.